Train Dreams is a tough one to put into words. You could probably tell by the length of this video, but the feelings that I have after watching it are kind of complicated and all over the place, but they all orbit around the word marvelous. Not in the flashy, overblown sense, but in that quiet, reverent way. The kind of marvelous that makes you sit there for a while afterward, not entirely sure what to say. And then you come home and you make a long-ass video for YouTube. This film was directed by Clint Bentley, who you might remember as one half of the writing duo behind Sing Sing from last year, which was my favorite film of 2024. That one was directed by Greg Cuidar, Bentley's creative partner, and it had this impeccable verite-style realism, that natural, grounded humanism that just felt lived in. It brought that realism to the world of rehabilitation through the arts inside Sing Sing maximum security prison, and it was stunning. Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. So when I heard that Clint Bentley's next project was an adaptation of Train Dreams based on Dennis Johnson's novella, I was immediately on board. Now, full transparency, I haven't read the novella, but from what I gather, it's pretty abstract, and the film keeps that spirit while still being approachable. There's this linear story you could follow, but it feels like you're dreaming your way through someone else's life. For this video, I'm going to do sort of a spoiler-free section and then get into deep spoilers later on in the video. But first, what is this film about? This film follows Robert, played by Joel Edgerton. He's a logger, a day laborer in Spokane, Washington, doing brutal, dangerous work, helping build the railroads through the mountains of the Pacific Northwest. Pretty early on in the film, he meets a woman named Gladys, played by Felicity Jones, and they fall madly in love. They build a cabin by a river. It's this simple, idyllic life, but one that Robert can't hold on to because of the nature of his work, always leaving home for months on end, always working himself to the bone. And from the start, there's a quiet sense of tragedy in the air. You just know that this man's life isn't going to go smoothly, and yet it never plays as melodrama. It's more like the film is whispering to you, this is just how life is. Friends die on the job, accidents happen, cruelty exists, time marches on. The film's tone is matter-of-fact about it. It's not cold, it's just honest. It reminded me a lot of the Book of Job. We're watching a man who endures and endures with no explanation beyond that's life. And that's kind of what this movie is getting at, the inevitability of loss and the strange beauty of persistence. Visually, this film is breathtaking. The cinematography by Adolfo Veloso is just staggering. You feel the texture of the world, the rain on the bark, the dirt on skin, the fog moving through the mountains. There's a tactility to it. It reminded me of the opening of There Will Be Blood or something like Jeremiah Johnson, that ruggedness, that sense of man versus nature. There's also this storybook quality to Train Dreams that really stands out. That feeling of being told a tale that's been passed down, whispered over time. It reminds me a bit of that film from Netflix that came out a few years ago, The Devil All the Time. That same sense of sprawling Americana where every image feels like it's being pulled from some great tattered novel about the country's soul. But it also has shades of The Life of Chuck, the new Stephen King adaptation. That mix of myth and melancholy, the way that it treats ordinary life as something cosmic, something worth mythologizing. There's a real, let me tell you the story of Robert Grenier energy to this movie. It's not about plot as much as it's about memory, about the way a single life can stretch out and become a kind of folklore. And then through its narration by Will Patton and these spiritual drifting interludes, it also takes on this Terrence Malick quality, like The Tree of Life or To the Wonder, where you're not just watching a story unfold, you're feeling time move through a person. Joel Edgerton is in every single scene in this film, and it's one of his best performances ever. He plays a man who isn't special in any cinematic way, just a guy doing his best, trying to find meaning in the chaos. But what makes the performance so powerful is that you feel his recognition of beauty, his quiet awe at the world, even as it keeps breaking his heart. So before I get into spoilers, I'll just say this. Train Dreams is a deeply human film. It's slow, sometimes punishing, sometimes transcendent. It's about work, loss, grief, progress, and the kind of spiritual humility that comes from realizing just how small we all are. All right, from here on out, we're going to get into spoilers. If you have not seen this film yet, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's on Netflix right now. It's easily one of my favorites of 2025. So within the first 10 minutes, this film opens with a moment that's honestly really hard to shake. Robert is out on the job in the middle of nowhere, early 1920s Washington wilderness. He's sitting there eating his lunch with one of his coworkers, a Chinese laborer. And there's this sense of quiet between them, not necessarily friendship in the modern sense, but a kind of wordless camaraderie that happens between men who have been breaking their backs side by side. And then these other guys show up, full of that old world hatred that doesn't need a reason. It just exists waiting for a target. They stumble over angrily, and before Robert or anyone else can do anything, they grab the Chinese worker and throw him off the side of the train tracks to his death. It happens in a matter of seconds. You see it hit Robert immediately that he could have done something that maybe he should have, but he doesn't. He freezes, and that inaction becomes the thing that clings to him for the rest of the film and for the rest of his life. That's the original sin of Train Dreams. Not that Robert is cruel or malicious, it's that he's human. And being human means sometimes you just don't move when you should. And that one moment of stillness can haunt you forever. From then on, that coworker is like an apparition hanging over the entire story as we see him again and again sitting next to Robert at a campfire or wandering through the wilderness. Every tragedy that follows carries an echo of that first one. Like the world is saying, you never paid your debt for that moment, so now everything you touch will carry its residue. The movie then opens up to this kind of sweeping biography of Robert's adult life. We go from 1917 Idaho all the way up through Washington in 1968, which notably is the same year that Apollo 8 orbited the moon. More on that in a little bit. That detail is not random. Clint Bentley is drawing a straight line between the most primal kind of human labor, cutting down trees in the rain, and the most advanced thing humans had done up to that point, flying to space. It's the whole 20th century collapsing into a single lifetime. And that's where William H. Macy's character comes in, Arn. He's this sort of wandering gadabout explosives expert who drifts into Robert's orbit. The two of them form this quiet friendship, the kind that can only happen among people who have spent most of their lives with no one but the trees to talk to. They share a few fires, a few jokes about Kentucky, and every once in a while, Arn says something that just sticks to you like tree sap. There's one moment where they're sitting by a campfire, both of them staring into the flames, and Arn says something about the trees that they're cutting down, how some of them have been standing for 500 years, maybe more, 5 centuries of silent existence, and now they're just gone, cut up, hauled off, turned into boards for some railroad bridge that'll probably be obsolete in 20 years. And you could see that realization start to crack something open in Robert. For the first time, he's really seeing the futility in what they're doing, the smallness of it all. He's not just working anymore, he's participating in erasure. It's not that he's become a philosopher overnight, but you sense him starting to feel the weight of time, how brief human work is compared to the life of a tree. And I think that's where the movie really finds its rhythm. It lives in that exact intersection between awe and despair, between marveling at what we can build and mourning what we destroy to build it. Every scene sits somewhere between those two poles. It's the awe of human progress clashing with the quiet horror of realizing that progress always has a body count, even if it's just a loss of something beautiful and irreplaceable, or in the case of Arn, it comes in the form of a random fallen tree branch. That's Train Dreams in a nutshell, not just a story about man's bad luck, but about the tragedy of forward motion itself. After that, the movie just keeps rolling forward, and you start to feel that sense of dread settle in, like another tragedy is always waiting around the corner. It's not a question of if something bad will happen to Robert, it's a question of when. And when it does happen, the big one, the wildfire, it's devastating. Robert's been away for work again. One of those long stretches where he's gone for months, and he's talking to his crew about how this might be his last job. He's tired. He's ready to go home. He's ready to just exist for a while, start up a sawmill on his property, be a husband to his wife, and a father to his daughter. But when he finally gets back, he finds his home, the little cabin by the river, the one that we saw him build with Gladys, reduced to ash, and his wife and daughter are gone. And from there, the film slows down even more. It becomes about grief in all of its weird forms. There's the grief you cry through, and then there's the grief you work through. There's an instant where he's laying out in the pouring rain, in the ash and the rubble that was once his home, curled up with his head on a log, just waiting for time to do something, to move forward, to go backward, anything but stand still. It's one of the most haunting images in the entire movie, in my opinion. This man lying in the mud, shivering, half asleep, surrounded by the wreckage of his life, waiting for nature to make the next move, because by that point, he stopped believing that he can. Robert cycles through the grief. He rebuilds what's left of the cabin, not because it makes sense, but because what else is there to do? He goes back to work. He hauls timber, he fixes fences, he does odd jobs around town, he lays down track. But it's like he's living inside the memory of his own life. You could see it in Edgerton's face. He's there, but he's not really there. And I think that's something the film captures better than almost anything else I've seen recently. That stage of grief where you're not even sad anymore, you're just existing in the negative space that used to be your life. It's like time keeps moving, but you've quietly opted out of participating. And then we meet this new character played by Kerry Condon. Her name is Claire. She's a forester, and her scenes with Robert are some of my favorites in the whole movie because they're not about fixing him. They're not about love or even redemption. She's just there. She's someone who listens, someone who shares the same silence that he does. There's one scene in particular where he goes to visit her, and Robert starts to talk, like really talk, for the first time about the presumed death of his family. It's awkward, and it's depressing, and it's halting, and he's not making much sense. He talks about hearing their voices when he's out in the fields, but you could tell it's something that he's needed to do for a while now. All of this pain has been jammed up behind years of rugged, manly stoicism that just starts to leak out. And the thing is, none of this is presented as punishment. The movie's not interested in hard and fast lessons about karma or divine justice or even narrative balance. It's more like this is what life does. It gives, it takes, it forgets, and it moves on. That's kind of what I love about Clint Bentley's direction here. He's not moralizing. He's not turning Robert into a symbol. He's just observing. And in that observation, there's something quietly transcendent. By the time we reach the final stretch, Robert as an old man, it feels like we lived an entire life with him. He takes that train to Spokane, Washington, and sees the new world for the first time. Skyscrapers, electric lights, theaters, people talking about astronauts orbiting the moon. The narration tells us that he hadn't looked in a mirror for 10 years, that he had never used a telephone. And then, just like that, we hear that he died peacefully one day. It's such an unceremonious ending, no grand revelation. Just, that's the end of his story. And weirdly, it feels kind of perfect. Because Train Dreams isn't a movie about answers, it's a movie about persistence, about the quiet, stubborn act of being alive, even when the world keeps remaking itself around you. It's rare to get a movie this humanist, a movie that looks at people, really looks, and finds something both small and infinite within them. There's no cynicism, there's no satire. Bentley's not trying to make a point about Americana or masculinity or faith in any neat capital letter way. He's just showing you one life, lived in full, and letting you sit with it. And by the end, it feels like you've somehow lived a piece of that life too. Once again, it reminded me a lot of Terrence Malick, especially The Tree of Life. There's that same combination of reverence and ache and that belief that every single life, no matter how quiet or how unremarkable, holds entire galaxies of meaning. There's also the feeling that everything we do, every gesture, every small act of kindness or cruelty ripples outward in ways that we'll never see. It's also a movie that's painfully aware of time, how it moves, how it erases, how it builds, how it destroys at the same pace. The wilderness turns into industry. The railroad gives way to the highway gives way to space travel. And all of it happens within one man's lifetime. Less than 100 years separate a guy swinging an axe from a man orbiting the moon. That's insane. But the movie isn't in awe of progress. It's almost ambivalent. There's a scene that really hits home. The men at one point are celebrating the completion of a train line that they've been working on. There's this big speech about how their work is going to change everything, how it'll turn an 11-hour trip into a 2-hour one. It's this moment of pride, of purpose. And then, over it, the narration comes in and says that in just a few decades, that train line will be obsolete, and it'll be replaced by a highway a couple miles to the west. Cut to older Robert sitting on a train, watching his cars whip down that very highway, and you can see it in his eyes, that existential question. What was the point of all of this? And that, to me, is the film's emotional core. It's about the futility baked into progress, the idea that every structure we build, physical or emotional, has an expiration date. That doesn't make it meaningless, but it does make it tragic. And that's what Train Dreams captures better than anything I've seen this year. That duality, that push and pull between destruction and grace, between poetry and practicality. There's a line in this movie that just hits home for me. It's said after 3 men die on the job, crushed by a falling log. The foreman says, "The world doesn't stop needing spruce." Essentially, let's get back to work. It's not callous, it's just true. The work does go on. The world still needs its wood. It still needs bridges. And that line really sums up the film's worldview. Life keeps moving. Whether you're ready or not, whether it's fair or not, the work continues. And that could sound bleak, but the movie doesn't treat it that way. It's more like, yes, the world moves on, but we were here. We existed in it. We loved things. We broke things. We built things. And for a moment, we mattered. The cinematography, again, I have to shout it out. It's a huge part of what makes all of this land. Adolfo Veloso turns the natural world into something almost mythic. There are these shots where you could see the pores on Joel Edgerton's skin, the dirt under his fingernails, and then he cuts to a wide shot of the mountains and trees that feel older than time. Or they'll cut to the boots of a fallen coworker that have been nailed to a tree and left there for a decade. It's that contrast, the smallness of the man and the vastness of the world that makes this film feel kind of overwhelming. And the score by Bryce Dessner of The National just sneaks under your skin. It's not manipulative or big. It's pianos and woodwinds and strings. He's slowly becoming one of the best film composers working today. And then there's Joel Edgerton, who's absolutely phenomenal here. I've liked him for a long time. He's one of those actors who always brings a certain sturdiness to his roles, but this one's different. He's stripped down. There's no swagger, no artifice. He's just a man weathering the world. And that's such a hard thing to play convincingly, to be ordinary, but to make that ordinariness feel monumental. And that's what I think this film is saying, that ordinary life is monumental, that being alive at all is kind of a miracle. There's no end to the pain that this world inflicts on us or the pain we inflict on it, but there's also no end to our capacity to care or for recognizing beauty in spite of it all. Now, real quick, one of the things I really love about Train Dreams is the way that it constantly sidesteps your expectations. We've all been trained through decades of storytelling to anticipate certain payoffs. We think we know how these arcs are supposed to resolve. You see a man haunted by loss and you start waiting for the reveal. Are his wife and daughter still alive somewhere? Are we going to get the big cathartic reunion or the devastating confirmation? You see him forge this quiet connection with Kerry Condon's character, and you think, okay, maybe this will become a late in life love story. Maybe she's going to help him find inner peace. And of course, you assume that when he dies, the film will let you see it, that we'll get a final composed moment, the closure we've been taught to expect. But Train Dreams never gives you any of that. And that restraint, that refusal to play by the invisible rules of cinematic storytelling is exactly what makes it so powerful. The movie doesn't chase resolution because life rarely offers it. It's not interested in neat answers or emotional symmetry. It just drifts forward like time itself, leaving questions half answered, leaving doors half open. And there's something deeply refreshing about that. To sit through a story that's confident enough to deny you what you've been conditioned to want, and instead give you something truer. By the end, when Robert dies, it's not tragic. It's peaceful. You just feel this deep exhale in the film, like the film itself is finally letting go, because it's not about death being sad. It's about death being the final act of living. And maybe that's why Train Dreams stuck with me so much. It's not just a film about one man's life. It's about life itself. The quiet kind, the one that doesn't usually get remembered, the kind most of us live. It's about that fragile miracle of waking up every day and continuing to move through the world, even when you don't understand it. It's about the beauty of still caring, still noticing the light through the trees, even after everything burns down. That's sort of the paradox that this movie lives in. Progress and decay, hope and despair, love and loss. It's all coexisting, and all of it's necessary. It's one of those films that doesn't give you closure. It gives you perspective. And maybe that's enough. Oh boy. This was a long one. And part of me wants to apologize for that, but another part of me is sitting here thinking there are so many things about this film that I wish I could have touched on that I just did not have the time for. As a little bit of peek behind the curtain, how the sausage gets made, I usually come home from watching a movie and I record a voice note of just regurgitating all of the thoughts that I have on the movie. Well, this voice note ended up being almost an hour long, and I tried to whittle that voice note down into something like what you all just saw in this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please head down to the comments and let me know what you thought of Train Dreams. Let me know if you agree with my opinions on this film. I personally think it's one of the best, if not maybe the best film of 2025. That's my gut reaction right out of the theater. Maybe that'll change as the year continues to go on. But yeah, let me know down in the comments what you thought of Train Dreams. When you're done with that, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on this channel. And then when you're done with that, don't forget to follow me on Letterboxd so you could see what I'm watching when I'm watching it. And with that, I'll see you all next time.